So that is why I believe it's written for them. The when part, yes, sure, because it's going to make a lot more sense to write this immediately to them. To write this to them later on when they have already rejected him in such a way where just before the destruction of the temple and the wars are everywhere around them, that's kind of late. It's kind of, sorry guys, but that's way too late. He wanted to reach his people there and then. Okay? There and then. And this is as well. It just makes a lot more sense with immediately. So some inter-Bible, or in the book of Acts, for example, I mentioned it a bit earlier. The first time, John and Peter, they were captured, right? The second time, only Peter. Where's John? Why John? Why was John not captured this time? Right? Remember at the cross, Jesus told John to take care of his mother. Why not his brother James? Because James and his others are going to be there in Jerusalem leading the church. They're going to be in harm's way. But John not. Jesus knew that. That is why, not because John was there at the cross and he could. Right? But because Jesus knew that John is going to last this long, because John is going to be sent by the disciples to go and write this. Right? John is going to be out of harm's way. He's not going to. And immediately in Acts, you don't see John there in Jerusalem. It's Peter being captured. Okay, that doesn't say John didn't come and go, right? But now it's Peter. So I would say, I believe that stage where Peter then was, when John was outside taking care of Mary and writing the gospel to the leaders. Okay, and so it from the inter-Bible, from Acts, we can kind of find this. And then the way his wordings that he used, how he spoke, how he would use an explanation of terminology from the north, right, to explain, because these people in the south would not be able to, the leadership, okay, would not be able to understand it. Speaking another language, for example, writing in Greek, okay, it's like the book War and Peace. It is written by Tolstoy, his most famous work. It doesn't start with Russian, it starts with French. Right? Why? Because everyone spoke French in the upper class. That's what the language they spoke. If you had to speak some other colloquial Russian, then you would have had to explain it to the people. The same way he is explaining a lot of this terminology to these leadership. Another thing we see why, say, John, why is because we don't know exactly how, but remember in the end of John, he could get Peter into the house of the high priest because he knew the name of the servant and he knew the way to get in there. Right? So as well, again, we see connection that the other three didn't have. Okay, so there's so much inside the book, in the gospel that is, and here plus Acts as well, where it clearly shows that John was well placed to write to the leadership, educated enough to write to the leadership, and having the right connections to the leadership. Plus, it adds up to the fact that God is covering the whole nation. It makes sense that he will speak to the Jew first, like Paul said, to the Jew first. Right? It makes sense because these were the people throughout. So God is reaching out to them first. And it makes sense why Luke then later on writes to the Gentiles, because then, and it makes sense why lots of the other books are then more focused Gentile-wise, but not solely, but more on that. Okay? So yes, I believe that the Gospel of John was written in the 30s. That's just basically therefore the first one. I would say the others were written as well, pretty much very soon after that. But why? Like for example, so people very often say, but the connections between John and the Synoptic Gospels, like the Synoptic Gospels not mentioning John not mentioning them, kind of idea. Okay, first because it's a different kind of a book. But why did John not use any of those other stories? Because he wrote it first. Okay? Because he's first. That's plain simple. A very simple solution to this. Why is John not mentioning any of the other guys? Because he wrote it first. What can be easier than that? Okay? And as well the structure, how he structured it around the 7 miracles and the I am sayings. Okay, we will get to all of those. Who would have understood this the best? The people out there who didn't know the Old Testament and all these connections to Moses? Would they have understood this best? I mean, it's like, right, really? They would not have been able to make the connections at all. What is in the beginning to do with in the beginning? Why in the beginning was a word? I mean, what's the connections? Like John, you start off with in this way and you speak to people who don't really teach us or others who don't really understand, who don't really have these connections. That's a waste of time. That's really a waste of time. It all makes perfect sense that he wrote in such a way to the people who would have understood it the best way. And when we understand it, then we can as well see this interlocking beauty between the old and the new. And that is as well the reason why I'm doing John next. Because this is the book that's connecting so much more than any other book in such a way with the Old Testament, especially the books of Moses, the Pentateuch, and in a huge way with Genesis.